Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to another amazing Saturday session. I'm always so happy, like I get sort of nervous right beforehand because it's like we're rushed and, things to do, and then, Sheikh is tired and preparing, he hasn't slept all night, and, so there's always just that little bit of like, oh my God. And then as soon as we get here, I'm so happy. So welcome. First of all, I want to give a shout out to our dear friend Sally, who sent us gifts that were unexpected. There was no occasion, just purely out of love. And included in that was this camel t-shirt, which I totally fell in love with. And so I had to wear it, and I just said, this is my excuse to just ask everyone, how's your inner camel? So thank you, Sally. It's really amazing. And then just before we get started, last week when I was gone in California, I got an email, and I wasn't here, so I was sort of sad that I didn't have a chance to pass this on or do the appropriate thing. So I wanted to just share. We have a dear friend of our Usuli, or in our Usuli community, Allah, who lost his grandfather last week. I think it's been maybe it was June 15th that I got a message, and he asked if we could all pray for him, for his nanabai. His grandfather was named Muhammad Kalim Allah. He was a devoted man of God who dedicated the last 30 years of his life to continuous worship. He was a poor and simple man, respected for his intelligence and known for his mild manner and quaint nature. He even managed to fast all 30 days last Ramadan. He was 95 years old, despite doctors and all of his family advising him not to. He was a silent rebel who did what he wanted, and even if it meant drawing closer to Allah, alhamdulillah. So, I just wanted to ask if everyone could please pray for him. And then also, if you haven't had a chance to watch the Usuli khutbah yesterday, it was absolutely incredible, really powerful, about what happens when you dare speak the truth. There was a high school student who is effectively valedictorian. She decided to stand up and speak truth and dared mention what's happening to the Uyghur Muslims in China. And dared mention, other, Palestine and some other issues. And the people that were in the audience, the parents of her classmates, were so upset that they attacked her, and she ended up in the hospital, which is just shocking. But anyway, so the professor talked about that. Her name is Huda, and it is, our job to, stand by her, send her gifts, as the professor said, send her messages of support, pray for her, anything that we can, because this is what we need, is we need our children to learn to speak truth to power. That's what's going to make a difference. And it was really beautiful because the professor was really speaking to her and said, this was the right thing to do. But unfortunately, in our day and age, when you choose to speak truth to power, it comes, what you end up with is a very difficult road and a lot of resistance and, and in this case, even violence, which is just tragic and wrong. But may God bless her and reward her for what she did, and may God empower her and give her strength to continue on. And may she be a source of inspiration for all of us, inshallah. So I wanted to just mark, today is the 1-year anniversary of the start of the journey of Project Illumine. It's not, it depends on how you count it, but 52 Saturdays ago, we started with the first halakha on Surah Al-Hadid. And, back then, we had sort of no idea. We had sort of a dream, and we didn't really quite know what was going to happen. But I went back and I, looked back on YouTube to just sort of watch, that original halakha, and it was sort of interesting because, when you go back in time and you try to remember, we were seated in our living room couch in Thousand Oaks. Doogie was barking, I looked stressed. It was like we were in the middle of the pandemic, and I was just like, oh my God, where were we back then? But it feels like it was not that long ago in some respects, and in other respects it feels like a million years ago, like so much has happened. And that was just, I say it's the start of the journey because that was the first halakha. And back then, we were doing halakas like this on a monthly, sometimes every 2-week basis. And I just remember how powerful it was to sit through that. We obviously had started halakas on tafsir before that, and maybe I should go back a little bit and really thank Sharif because when we started Usuli, doing tafsirs was not really part of the plan. But Sharif always had it in his mind that this was a really important thing that he needed to make happen. And he used to just really get on the Sheikh's case, do Surah Rahman, do Surah Rahman. And, if you watch any of the old videos, you know that finally when the Sheikh decided to do Surah Rahman, it had taken 6 years of prodding and pleading and pressure. And then he finally gave in to that, and we started. Oh, actually, yeah, let's let a lot. I don't know if you can get on.
It was 7.
It was 7 years? Okay, just to be sure. I just want to say, Assalamu alaikum Allah. I just, when you get a chance to replay back, I asked everyone, I shared about your grandfather, and hopefully, everyone will pray, and so may God bless his soul. I'm happy that you just joined us on the interactive group, so. And I read the little story about he was a silent rebel. Totally cool. So, anyway, so just to go back, we doing tafsirs was really not ever part of the plan, and Sharif, alhamdulillah, succeeded in convincing, the Sheikh to start this journey. And when we started, it was really just in a traditional line-by-line tafsir, and we loved having those once a month. And then when we started doing Project Illumine, it was a completely different kind of experience, because now it was personal. Now it was like, this is what he, spent his entire life dedicated to studying first, and then praying on, and then to actually share these things. And so at that time, every time we would get one halakha, Surah Hadid, it was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. When can we do it again? And we'd have to wait a month, or we'd have to wait 2 months, and we'd be like, okay, what's next, And I think sometimes we forget, just how we were just, everyone was so excited and waiting, but you had to be patient to get the next one. And in contrast to where we are now, where it's like, holy cow, we're getting one every few days, and it's hard to keep up, and it's amazing, and it's not enough time to process. So it's an incredible journey. And even back then when we started, in June last year, Ohio was not even in, there's no sense of Ohio. Ohio was just another place, another part of the country. And then, we didn't even start thinking about Ohio until October, right? So it's not even been a whole year. So, you think you have plans, and God comes through and it's like, nope, this is what you're doing. So since then, we've packed an entire 100,000 book library. We've, sold our homes in California. We moved across country with, 5 trailer trucks. Since we've been here, the students have been incredible in, putting together the library, building bookcases, sorting through books, trying to find homes. We, hopefully you guys are watching on social media to see the pictures of the transformation. It's fun when we go back and we just look at pictures of, this room that we're in now was completely full of boxes when we arrived, not even that long ago. And then now it's completely empty, and the Arabic books are done, and it's starting to look really incredible. It's just an exciting journey, And I even, last night we had a reflection group, and I think what was I think what was really striking about it is it was probably one of the best reflection groups we'd had, where we all ended up in tears. So, and you see when you start thinking about where you were even 6 months ago, and where your headspace was, and just after halakha after halakha after halakha, and just how it transforms you, it transforms your insides. Even just when I looked at the halakha for Surah Al-Hadid a year ago, looking at myself, I felt gosh, you look tired, you're not smiling, what's up with you, you look irritated, you look annoyed. And then now I was just watching back, the story, some of the halakhas where I've given intros here. And it's wow, I feel like I genuinely smile more. I'm not as stressed. I'm happy because I'm genuinely I feel so blessed to be here studying and learning all of this. So it's exciting to go back and see your own transformation, and even more so, what's cool is when I went back to see, the video a year ago, I noticed that one of the people who had commented had just found us a month ago and said, I just found your channel, alhamdulillah. And, and we still get, messages from people who are so excited to find us, and then they, send their laundry list of questions. It's oh my God, I found you. Okay, here are all the things that I really need an answer to. Now, things that have been preventing me from believing in my faith or reconnecting with my faith. And so, I just wanted to say, I'm so grateful. I always feel certainly I've said before, when I am getting ready even for this introduction, I always pray, please God, help me, to say what you want me to say, help me, to say something that someone needs to hear. And, like when I think about someone starting on this journey, and just discovering the Usuli Institute, I always feel like, okay, alhamdulillah, God sent you here. And then they get so excited and they want to know. And so I would just say, like looking at all the content we've produced, it's overwhelming. There's just so much. It's like, where do you even start? And so I would just say to people who are just joining us or just coming on board, wherever you are in your journey, just be patient and take your time and pray and ask God, guide me, where do I start? What should I do? And I feel like that's, part of that building your relationship with God that's very powerful. And God brought you here at a particular time and time again. We have so many stories of people who found us when right at the right time in their journey. And I truly believe, because what we do here is advanced, it's intense. No one wants to sit through a 6-hour video on YouTube, but they do, and God sends them when they're ready to do that. And that's why I also, we talk a lot about how, we don't have that many followers, but for us, it's like, it's not a numbers game. It's a game for, it's for when you and your soul are longing and you are ready to do the hard work of really starting to develop your relationship with God and change and transform. Because I truly believe if you genuinely want to transform and build your relationship with God, everything is here for you. And even though there's an ocean of knowledge, I believe that if you ask God to direct you, even if you're searching through whatever video and something looks interesting and you click on it, that actually God, can direct you very easily to what you need to hear when you need to hear it. It's an incredible journey. We started here in the end of January, so with Surah and then went into the deep immersion, advanced, knock you off your socks version, try to sink or swim version. But alhamdulillah, it's amazing. I mean, I even think, thank you, Mara, again, for coming up and doing the introduction. I was reminded of when we started Usuli. And I used to have to literally write out every single word I wanted to say in the introduction because I was too scared, okay, I'm going to say something bad, I'm going to say something wrong, and I would literally write it all out and I would memorize it and I would practice it and I would get up here and I'd be so nervous and then I would blank out and freak out, and now I feel like, alhamdulillah, I've done these now enough where I can just write a few notes like this and think about, what I want to say and ask God to help me. And alhamdulillah, it just feels a lot more natural. So it's just a journey. Everything is a journey. Everything is a learning. Everything takes its time, needs its patience, needs its hard work, commitment, and, and God front and center. I mean, that's the most important thing. So I'm so grateful for these sessions. And I just wanted to have an opportunity to say thank you to everyone here. Especially after that teary-eyed, reflection group. We all had to wipe each other's tears. But it's we didn't start that way, and that's where we are now, and I'm so grateful. So inshallah, may we have many more tears, much more knowledge, much more connection with God, and many more people who join us on this journey. Alhamdulillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalam ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi muttaba'u bi ihsanin ila yawm ad-din. Allahumma shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli wa rabbil alamin. Inshallah, today we're going to do Surah Shura. And there is a lot to say about Surah Shura. We've already alluded, or I mentioned Surah Shura in the context of talking about other surah, particularly Surah Fussilat, which was revealed right before Surah Shura. And Surah Zukhruf, which we did, was revealed right after Surah Shura. And if you remember what we said about Fussilat and especially Surah Ghafir and Surah Zumar, and then Surah Ghafir, and then Fussilat, which were the surah leading up to Surah Shura. So in order of revelation, Surah Shura is most likely number 62 in order of revelation. And obviously then it is a late Meccan surah. It is well after, or after Surah Al-Isra, and it belongs to the group of surah that were revealed leading up to the Hijrah, sort of setting the groundwork and setting the foundations for the Hijrah of Muslims from Mecca to Medina. Surah Al-Shura is also interesting in particular regard, in that it is among the Hawamim, among the 7 surah that are known as the Hawamim of the Quran. Hawamim, and as you remember, there are the surahs, the surah that begin with Ha Mim. And the Hawamim, as I've mentioned before, have a particular nature to them, that they are sort of the constitutional heart and core of the Quran. Within the Hawamim, you will find the ethical core of the Quran. But Surah Al-Shura, all the Hawamim begin with Ha-Mim, and then right after Ha-Mim, there is some reference to the Quran itself or to the revealed book. So all the Hawamim will say something like Ha-Mim, ذَلِكَ الكِّتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, or some statement about this book being a decisive book, a book from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a book that establishes truth, etc., etc. But Surah Al-Shura doesn't do that. It is the only surah of the Hawamim that doesn't begin with a statement about the book, but has a very different beginning. But then there's another noteworthy aspect about Surah Al-Shura, is it is the only surah of the Hawamim that starts with Ha-Mim and then has a series of 3 letters after the Ha-Mim. So it is Ha-Mim, Ayn, Sin, Qaf. And why that is so has given rise to a lot of speculation in the tradition. Why, of all the Hawamim, this particular surah starts with the expected Ha-Mim, but then the unexpected 3 letters, Ayn, Sin, Qaf. And why doesn't it, like the other Hawamim, affirm or have some declaration about the Quran as God's revealed book? And as you know, that there is really no way that we can find out. There is no reliable set of reports or otherwise that tell us what these letters mean. Although there have been a lot of theories and a lot of, whether numerology or whatever. And with Ain, Sin, Qaf, there are various theories that have been proposed. There's no point in going through them because, but some of them, for instance, said that Ain stands for knowledge, ilm. Sin stands for sana. I'm not even sure how to translate sana. What is sana? How do you translate it? It will come to me. I'm blanking out on what sana in English. There's a word for it, but another. It's not one of Allah's so-called names, but it is like ilm, a characteristic of a divine condition, which combines in the meaning benevolence, illumination, the coming of goodness, and that Qaf, some have said, stands for Qudra, or God's omnipotence and ability. Others have said Ain stands for one of Allah's names, Al-Aziz, the omnipresent, the all-powerful and independent. Sin stands for Salam, again another one of Allah's attributes, the source of peace and the source of security and tranquility. And Qaf stands for Qadir, another one of these attributes of Allah, the all able and all capable. But as I said, none of it, we don't really, it is all speculative as to what Ayn, Sin, Qaf means after the Hamim. And there are much more mystical interpretations that has to do with the language of jinn and things like that. Anyway, so what Surah Shura does, we'll see. It's a little bit, I take a deep breath at the beginning because presenting it and presenting what my take on it is a little bit daunting, because what Surah Shura achieves, to put it mildly, I do not know how one can be a Muslim and not understand Surah Shura. Surah Shura comes at this critical juncture before Muslims are going to embark on creating not just a social experiment but a civilization. And it affirms and sums up and underscores some of the very basic foundational heart of the faith. And as you will notice, that many of the themes that have been raised in Surah Al-Zumar, Surah Al-Ghafir, Surah Fussilat are then carried forward and developed in Surah Shura in a specific way. First, I should mention also that Surah Shura, the established name of the surah now is a Shura. There are early traditions that proposed that Surah Shura would be called literally Surah Hamim. That didn't survive. There was some early traditions that refer to Surah Shura as Surah Ain Sin Qaf. That tradition didn't survive. The prevailing tradition that did survive was to call Surah Shura by that name, Ashura. And obviously the word Ashura occurs in the surah. The Shura occurs, that word occurs twice in the Quran. And the first time that it occurs in Surah is in Surah Shura. And that's why Surah Shura is known as Surah Shura. Now, Shura, we normally understand the word Shura by the way that it is used in Surah Shura, and later on in the Quran when it's used again, to mean consultation, and we'll talk more about this, but a form of consultation. But it is important to note something about that term, Shura, that has to do with the origin of the word itself. Yes, Shura is consultation, but Shura, as we will see, also connotes a form of tamkeen. A tamkeen means empowerment, the production of goodness. So, in fact, in linguistically, we say اشتار الفحل الناقة when we are assessing whether we can copulate cattle. So we use it in reference to the production of in copulation of cattle and the procreation of cattle. More common usage for Shura, or the origin of the word, is shar al-asal, which refers to the production of honey. So you notice that when bees produce honey, and the process by which bees produce honey. So the term is fascinating because the term refers to the process by which, or the dynamic by which, some goodness is produced. In usage, one of the aspects of that goodness is that, and we'll talk more about this, but I'm just flagging the main issues now, is when people make decisions through a dynamic that maximizes their input and therefore maximizes the result. And you will notice that collectively, Surah Shura is very much about the foundational principles for the creation of goodness at a collective and social level. Okay, so Surah Shura then begins, and as we said, an unusual beginning for one of the Hawamim. كذلك يوحى إليك وإلى الذين من قبلك الله العزيز الحكيم. كذلك يوحي إليك يوحي إليك وإلى الذين من قبلك الله العزيز الحكيم. As if it is a continuing discourse. But we know that it is the beginning of the discourse because this is underscored by the ha meme. So it is not left. It's not that we are continuing a surah, or it is not Surah Shura sort of like just a continuation of another surah, but the beginning of the surah itself by saying كذلك, thus, it flags something that becomes clear once you understand Surah Shura, that it is preceded by a build-up of meanings that were communicated through the previous surah, Zumar, Ghafir, and Fussilat. And we'll elaborate on this. So, thus does God reveal unto you and unto those before you, Al-Aziz Al-Hakim, the mighty and wise. Notice the very beginning of the surah, it right away connected the prophecy of Muhammad to the ongoing dynamic of Allah's prophecy to humanity. And so I don't hold you in suspense, because Surah Shura is going to deal with a sociological reality, and that's the reality of differences among human beings. In our modern language, diversity. So, thus, or like this, does God reveal unto you and unto those before you. له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وهو العلي العظيم. تكاد السماوات يتفطرن من فوقهن والملائكة يسبحون بحمد ربهم ويستغفرون لمن في الأرض. ألا إن الله هو الغفور الرحيم. والذين اتخذوا من دونه أولياء الله حفيظ عليهم وما أنت عليهم بوكيل. This will take us to up to verse 6. So like this, thus Allah reveals to you and to those before you. And to God belongs everything in the heavens and everything on earth, and God is the most exalted and God is the most magnificent. The heavens, the expression is remarkable. تكاد السماوات يتفطرن من فوقهن. The heavens are nearly rent asunder, nearly torn apart, while the angels praise God, they praise in the hymns of God, and seek forgiveness and pray for forgiveness for those on earth. And as to those who take partners, awliya or protectors, aside from God, you have no authority or control over them, because you're not a guardian over them. Now pause and reflect at this beginning. You, Muhammad, and your followers, in receipt of this revelation, are part of an ongoing cosmic process. You live with your affairs on earth, but you don't realize the realities beyond the physical dimensions in which you live. And if only you would realize these realities, you would realize that Allah's magnificence, Allah the Exalted, Allah which you cannot conceptualize, as we will see in Surah Shura, is such that the heavens are nearly torn apart, is in response to this magnificence. It is as if not just your realm on earth, but all the realms in the cosmos are held together by Allah, because if Allah would let go, they would be torn asunder. They would just all become separate and apart. This is central in laying the difference between you human beings and a reality that you cannot conceive and cannot truly understand, and that is the reality of divinity. Now, and there is a constant presence of pure benevolence and mercy. Angels that are constantly not just supplicating God, but praying for forgiveness for human beings. But praying for forgiveness for what? You're given that, you get closer to the theme, as in Surah Shura it tells you, Muhammad, understand that this world is full of people who rebel against God and who take protectors and partners. They do something that if God would give the cosmos a choice, the cosmos itself would fall apart, would combust from the pure insolence of those who do so. But the cosmos doesn't fall apart because God holds the cosmos together. And not only that, but it is God that wills that the angels pray for forgiveness and mercy for human beings, because God doesn't need the angels to pray for mercy and forgiveness. It is a pure act of benevolence. So if the cosmos doesn't fall apart, and if the angels continue to pray for human beings, even those who are most rebellious against God, and even those who don't believe in God and who take all types of partners, you are but a messenger. You are no guardian. A more eloquent statement of modesty is not possible. But it is like drawing a painting. Because part of this dynamic of modesty and the dynamic of Shura, as we will see, is that you understand your place in the cosmos. And you understand that foul things that human beings commit, it is only the benevolence of God that gives them the freedom to do what they do, whether for better or for worse. Now, this expression, تكاد السماوات يتفطرن من فوقهن. Remember that first, Allah doesn't need the prayer of angels. And so, what role does the prayer of angels for Allah to have mercy and forgiveness for human beings, even those who... It is in a realm that we do not understand. Do these prayers, in fact, prevent the cosmos from falling apart? We know that the prayers are not going to sway God one way or the other. That's not the point. But the prayers is an ongoing reality of mercy and benevolence. As some of the more inspired minds in the Islamic tradition said, if only every person who thinks of committing evil would realize that this universe is surrounded by angels who witness and whose hearts are broken because of the evil committed, and would remember that while you are busy having fun and indulging yourself, God has created beings that do nothing but ask for forgiveness for you and mercy for you. Perhaps a human being would be struck by a level of shame and would in fact refrain from doing that when they think. When they think that this cosmos realizes the greatness of God and can't contain that greatness, and it takes an affirmative act from the divine to keep this cosmos together. Well, this cosmos is kept together, hopefully, so that you will not simply indulge yourself, but that you will do good. And if a human being truly remembers this, then perhaps they would feel ashamed about doing what's wrong. Allah has held the cosmos together, and the angels are in a constant state of supplication. And what do? I offend. But regardless, you, Muhammad, you don't control them. And if Muhammad doesn't control them, a priori, the followers of Muhammad don't control them. So right out, you are confronted by that reality about diversity and difference. Yes, sin and kufr and blasphemy and all the wrong things are in full view of the divide, but the will of the divide is that people have the choice. وكذلك, this is now 7. وكذلك أوحينا إليك قرآنا عربيا لتنذر القرى ومن حولها وتنذر يوم الجمع لا ريب فيه فريق في الجنة وفريق في السعير. And thus we revealed unto you an Arabic Quran so that you can warn al-Qura, that's Mecca, mother of cities, Mecca, and those around Mecca, around the mother al-Qura. And understanding that ultimately some will go to heaven and some will go to hell. فَرِيقٌ فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَفَرِيقٌ فِي النَّارِ. The only thing I want to just say is that when you say القرى ومن حولها, it doesn't necessarily mean the close proximity around Mecca. من حول القرى, and the reason it's referred to as القرى, it's as if saying that Mecca is the center, and what is around Mecca is the entire universe that is around. So the point of this ayah is to say the center is Mecca. This is way before the Qibla is changed from Jerusalem to Mecca. But the foundations are being laid down for what will come. And then we get to the heart of the matter. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَهُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَلَكِنْ يُدْخِلُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ فِي رَحْمَتِهِ وَالظَّالِمُونَ مَا لَهُمْ مِنْ وَلِيٍّ وَلَا نَصِيرٍ. If God would have willed, God would have made all human beings but a single ummah, a single community. But this is not what God wills. And some, through God's will enter God's mercy. And the unjust, they have no true ally and no true recourse. After Surah Shura, the Quran will repeat several times the same basic idea that if Allah would have willed, you would have been all created without differences. But your language is different, your ethnicities and race is different, your gender is different, your habits and traditions are different. That is part of Allah's will. But as you will see, what is not different is the ethical core of humanity. And I'll show you this in a second. So then, I have nothing really to say about 9. Let's skip to 10. وما اختلفتم فيه من شيء فحكمه إلى الله ذلكم الله ربي عليه توكلت وإليه أنيب. If you disagree about something, then judgment should be to God. Now, in Islamic law, this becomes, not that surprisingly, a very big deal, because a lot has been written about how that impacts law, and the dynamics by which we ascertain God's judgment, etc., etc. And so, for instance, in a lot of the tradition, you'll find written that this statement does not apply to the practice of ijtihad, because ijtihad produces different opinions. Why? Because ijtihad at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was not permitted, was not possible. The Prophet is there. He could answer the questions. But after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, then this statement doesn't undermine the legitimacy of ijtihad or the legitimacy of the search for the divine law and the inevitability of different opinions about what God wants. But more to the heart of the matter is, for instance, what Al-Razi says. So he says, I'll read it in Arabic first. المراد منه أن الأمور التي لا اختلاف فيها باختلاف الشرائع، وهي الإيمان بالله والملائكة وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر، والإيمان يوجب الإعراض عن الدنيا والإقبال على الآخرة والسعي في مكارم الأخلاق والاحتراز عن رذائل الأحوال. And so on. So that when Allah says, when the Prophet ﷺ is alive, when Allah says, if you disagree about something, judgment belongs to God, it's a straightforward matter. We go to the Prophet and say, Prophet, tell us what God's judgment is. But after the death of the Prophet, more fundamentally, what this means is, if you human beings disagree, there is a backbone to humanity. And as we'll see in the rest of Shura, that this backbone to humanity is where God's judgment is. You ought not disagree about this backbone. Well, what is this backbone? It's belief in God, believe in angels, believe in the revealed books of God, and belief in makarim al-akhlaq, belief in virtue, and ethics itself. والاحتراز عن رذائل الأحوال, and the necessity of the duty of refraining from what is immoral and wrong. So it is like there is a plain, a field where again, the Surah Shura builds upon each other. Its parts are cumulative. So just hold on to your hats. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that فَحُكْمُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ, that it is judgment belongs to God in the post-prophetic period, we search for the ethical core. The ethical core, which as long as you are dwelling within this ethical core, we say you are still within the realm of the divine. And when you deviate from the ethical core, although we might not have an authority over you to force you to come to the ethical core, but nevertheless, you must be cognizant that you have now deviated from the realm of the divine. And the unjust, وَالظَّالِمُونَ مَا لَهُم مِّن وَلِيٍّ وَلَا نَصِيرٍ, and the unjust, when Allah says that they have no ally, وَلَا نَصِيرٍ, and no one that will aid them, yes, Allah is talking about the hereafter. But also Allah is saying this normatively. Meaning, the unjust, in the same way that in the hereafter they will have no ally and no one that supports them, normatively they ought not have on this earth allies or supporters. Put differently, if the unjust have allies and supporters, you have already deviated from hukmullah. You have already deviated from God's rule. And so, for instance, Qurtubi, and this is just a sample of the type of discourses that these ayahs of Razi has a very long discussion, but the Qurtubi says, الأصول التي لا تختلف فيها الشرائع هي التوحيد والصلاة والزكاة والصيام والحج وأداء الأمانة وصلة الرحم وتحريم الكفر والقتل والزنا والإزاية للخلق والاعتداء على الحيوان واقتحام الدناءات وما يعود بخرم المروءات، فهذا كله مشروع دينا واحدا وصلة واحدة لم تختلف على ألسنة الأنبياء وإن اختلفت أعذارهم. So what he's saying is that human beings can have different laws, different religions, different systems of thought, different cultures, but that ethical core, according to Qurtubi, he says Tawheed, monotheism, as-salah wal-zakah wal-siyam wal-hajj, prayer, giving to, supporting the poor, zakah in this context means that, fasting and pilgrimage. He doesn't mean Islamic fasting or Islamic pilgrimage, but the concept of fasting and pilgrimage are in all religions and ought to be in all systems of belief. Beyond that, أداء الأمانة, honesty and faithfulness. صلة الرحم, kindness to kinsfolk, honoring your family ties. القتل والزنا, murder and fornication and adultery. وإزاية الخلق, and hurting other people. والاعتداء على الحيوان, and hurting animals. واقتحام الدناءات. Here in this context it means like behavior that is selfish and uncaring. وبخرم المروءات, behavior that is treacherous and dishonest. So he says these ethical principles will be found in all religions. You could be a Muslim, you could be a Christian, you could be a Jew, but if you stick to that ethical core as within the context of diversity, Allah is still the Hakam. Allah is still the ruler. If you rebel against these basic ethical core, then you've deviated from the realm of the divine. We'll come back to this because there's more to say about it. وما اختلفت فاطر السماوات والأرض جعل لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا ومن الأنعام أزواجا يذرأكم فيه ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. This is 11. The originator of the heavens and the earth, who appointed for you from amongst yourself mates, and also appointed mates to cattle, so that you may multiply thereby. ليس كمثله شيء. The study Quran says, not is like unto him. وهو السميع البصير, yet he is the seer of all and the hearer of all. Now pause here, because notice this beginning of Surah Shura was to tell you that Allah is so different from anything you are familiar with. You simply have no frame of reference with the way that your brains are built, the way that your bodies are built, to understand Allah, who is hardly contained by the cosmos. If Allah didn't hold the cosmos together, or not contained by the cosmos, that's misspeaking, but hardly, the cosmos is hardly contained within itself. Core here is, remember that as you deal with your own diversity, and as you deal with the search for the imperative of Allah being the judge amongst you, and as we said, Allah being the judge amongst you means the ethical core. remember something very important. Yes, Allah is the creator of the heavens and earth. Yes, Allah sees all and hears all. But Allah is unlike any other thing. Now, why is this important? Because of a very simple thing. Don't project yourself onto God. Don't project your egotistical fights. Don't project your egotistical competition. Don't project your ego-filled disagreements. There are a lot of things that as human beings you will care about a lot. But remember, Allah لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Allah is not like cheering for a country. You see this among nationalists all the time. It's Allah is Egyptian, Allah is Iranian, Allah is Saudi, Allah is whatever. Allah is not the owner of a soccer team or a football team. Allah is not a gender. Allah is not about controlling women or disciplining men. Once you start the core to the project of piety that you are embarking on is to understand that you cannot impute to Allah what dwells within your egos. Because of who you are as human beings, you are very different than what Allah is. Once you get into the trap of thinking of Allah in human terms, and we've encountered this already, hinted at in earlier surah, but Surah Shura comes and just bluntly, just spells it out and says that once you're getting into that trap, you will end up being among the zalimun. You could end up imagining that Allah has a son. You could end up thinking that Allah needs to be crucified to forgive sins of people. You could end up thinking that Allah, as a result, exists there to just pamper you. And as so many Christians do, only if you accept Jesus Christ, He forgives all your sins. So God is there basically as your cheerleader. And as a result, it is Christianity. In fact, it is Christianity that has validated some of the worst atrocities that human beings have ever confronted. Colonialism. You know, we don't, because history is written by the victorious party, we don't pay attention to the role that Christianity played in colonialism. And we often forget that colonialism exterminated not 6 million people, exterminated 40, 50 million people by the most conservative count. If history was written by non-Christians, it will all become common knowledge what role Christianity played in colonialism and in the extermination of native cultures all over the world. But the reason you have no clue about this is because it's Christians who mostly wrote history. And they consistently excluded or minimized the role that Christianity played in the atrocities and crimes of, even the role that Christianity played in the Holocaust. How often do you hear anyone talk about the role that Christianity played in the rise of Nazism and in the anti-Semitism of the Holocaust? Leave alone in the racism that exterminated the Incas and the Aztecs and the American Indians and the Palestinians and the Africans and just numerous millions upon millions upon millions of people. Once you say that God just simply suffers to remove your sins and all you have to do is to accept Jesus Christ, that's a very dangerous theological move. But similarly, when you say that God is like a human being, he has a chosen people and favorites. Why? Why, God, did you choose an ethnicity? Just because. What do you mean, just because? Are they superior to us? Well, of course, if you talk to modern Jews, they'll say, no, it's not that we're superior. It's just God wanted us to be an example to humanity for the good of all humanity. But why you? It's projecting human qualities onto God. And here at this critical juncture, listen, Muhammad and your followers, you don't know this, but Allah knows this. You're going to enter a new phase that you don't know about yet. And that phase is going to be building the state in Medina. I am telling you the pitfalls of humanity. And if you project human qualities onto God and imagine that God is like you in any way, and start thinking of God in human terms, you'll start doing things that we see modern Muslims do, like have a cow about whether a woman covers her hair or not. Really? لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Go back to the ethical core. The law is but an instrumentality to the ethical core. It might get us there, it might not. It depends. If you have a good legal mind, that good legal mind will think about whether the law is a successful instrumentality to the core or not. A dull legal mind can only think about the instrumentality as its own objective. An uninspired legal mind, an unintelligent legal mind, can only think of the law as its own purpose. They lack knowledge and creativity. They lack comparative epistemology. They can't think outside the box. Okay, fine. But you moralists must watch over the lawyers to make sure that they don't turn God vis-a-vis the relationship between God and the law as if God is a king who wants his orders blindly followed or else. As if God will get pissed off if you don't, pray this rak'ah or that rak'ah. It's not about being pissed off. This is not how we think about God. God wants you to pray the 5 prayers for your own good, for your own ethical core. Beyond the 5 prayers is the realm of ijtihad. Beyond the 5 prayers, and obviously fasting Ramadan and zakah and what the ethical core is. Okay. But ليس كمثله شيء. Now in Sufi-esque tafsir, you get tons of writings about ليس كمثله شيء. Nothing is like Allah. But the only way I can present Surah Shura, I've decided not to talk about the Sufi-esque tafsir because my own take on Surah Shura is quite enough, and I don't want to lose you. Now, notice that before Allah tells us that there is nothing like Allah, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, Allah precedes us with reminding us that Allah created us with a logic of azwaj, not just us, but the next in order of creation, mammals. Azwaj, with that expression, يَذْرَأُكُمْ فِيهِ. The study Quran translates it as He multiplies you thereby. You can translate يَذْرَأُكُمْ فِيهِ as multiply you thereby. To multiply you, to increase you. But you can also translate it as to protect you, to guard you. It has always caught my attention that while Allah tells us that having partners, azwaj, is a method of promoting us as human beings and even promoting animals. So here, what it's talking about is companionship, not just procreation. But it comes and says, in that same context that it reminds us of us, is the context where it tells us, well, Allah is a very different logic. No companionship, no partners. You don't have the terms to think about the magnanimity and the greatness of your Creator. له مقاليد السماوات والأرض يبسط الرزق لمن يشاء ويقدر. In a different قراءة ويقدر. إنه بكل شيء عليم. This is 12. The مقاليد السماوات والأرض, the study Quran says the keys of the heavens and earth. Maqalid is the controls. He controls the heavens and earth. All the controls of the heavens and earth are in Allah's hands. And remember that something that we've mentioned before in several surahs, that the blessings that you see people enjoy are not happenstance. What you have because Allah willed it, not because of coincidence or anything else. Then another of the core messages of Surah Shura: شرع لكم من الدين ما وصى به نوحا والذي أوحينا إليك وما وصينا به إبراهيم وموسى وعيسى أن أقيموا الدين ولا تتفرقوا فيه كبر على المشركين ما تدعوهم إليه الله يجتبي إليه من يشاء ويهدي إليه من ينيب وما تفرقوا إلا من بعد ما جاءهم العلم بغيا بينهم ولولا كلمة سبقت من ربك إلى أجل مسمى لقضي بينهم إن الذين أورثوا الكتاب من بعدهم لفي شك منه مريب. Okay, so verse 13. What has been sent to you, Muhammad, is what has been sent to the prophets Nuh, and Ibrahim and Musa and Isa. So he's mentioning the main prophets. But this goes back to a very critical point, that it is the same, the laws, the particular laws that apply in it for each set of day, age, group might change. But the core of the message is always the same, whether to Nuh alayhi salam or to Musa and Isa or Ibrahim alayhim salam or to any of the other prophets. And as Surah Shura will tell us time and again, although the core of the message is the same, human egos always intervene to split up God's core message and to cause tafarruq. People start creating disagreements, sects, groups, although it is the same message time and time again. كبر على المشركين ما تدعوهم إليه. Understand that although it is the same message time and again, for those that the Quran refers to as the mushrikeen, the mushrikeen here are all those who were having a hard time or resisting accepting Muhammad's message. It's as if Allah is saying they react in the same way that there were people who had a very hard time accepting Nuh's message or Musa's message or Isa's message or Ibrahim's message. We see the same thing with you. Although to you it seems a straightforward, innate, obvious, self-evident message. Kabura ma tad'uhum ilay, meaning that it's as if their egos won't permit them to embrace something so straightforward. They continuously or consistently have a hard time with it, because as straightforward as it is to even tell them that Allah is like no other. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. As Surah Shura itself will tell us in a second, they have a problem with that. Because their egos is such, unless they conceptualize something, conceptualize it even in the form of an idol, they have a hard time with accepting it. Unless they can see resurrection demonstrated before their eyes, they have a hard time with the idea of being resurrected. Unless they can see or meet a God, they have a hard time with accepting the idea of a God. كَبُرَ مَا تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَيْهِ is exactly that. It's like, the problem is with their souls, with their imagination, with their intellect, with their conscience. But these types of people have always been there with all the prophets. The Surah Quran for 14 says, they did not become divided till after knowledge has come unto them out of envy among themselves, and were it not for a word that has proceeded from thy Lord. Okay, I'm going to have to just paraphrase it, because if you read the study Quran, you're not going to get what it's talking about, right? Now, it's like saying the mushrikeen have always had a problem with okay, don't worry about these people. What is the issue here? The issue is that time and time again, for this Surah 14 has two possible interpretations, and I'll tell you which one. Interpretation number one, time and time again, that those who did believe, after they follow Moses, Jesus, Ibrahim, their egos, what the بغيا بينهم, what the study Quran translated as envy. بغيا بينهم is not necessarily envy. بغيا بينهم is because of their own inequities. Because of their own inequities, they consistently, time and time again, start having disagreements, having distractions. They split the religion into a million different sects and divisions, and ultimately the original message is time and time gone. The purity and straightforwardness and the transcendence of the original message. Why? Because of the egoism. Now, what is the egoism? بغيا بينهم. When you say, I just follow what I grew up with, I just follow my customs and traditions, I just follow what the people of my nation, I just follow the faith as articulated by my tribe, my clan, my nation, my people, rather than going back to the ethical core. Remember the theme of Shura. Al-Hukm bima anzal Allah, ruling by what God, and we said it's the ethical core in the context of diversity. All of this is a very sophisticated treatment of diversity, and you'll see what then Shura has to say about it. So that's interpretation number one. Interpretation number two says that what verse number 14 is talking about is that originally, those people in Mecca are the descendants of those who followed the Prophet Ismail. They deviated from the past and they went back to idol worship with the passage of time. And as to Jews and Christians, both in the Torah and in the Injil, they are told they have been awaiting the Messiah, the coming prophet. But that both as to the original Meccans, they deviated from the original path, from the original message, and became idol worshippers again. And as to Christians and Jews, although they've been saying that when God sends the Messiah, the awaited prophet, we will follow him. Once that God sent the awaited prophet, they refused to follow Baghyan Baynahum. Of these two interpretations, I think the first is the correct in the context of Surah Shura, because it is more consistent with the thrust of the surah itself, that this is a Meccan surah. It is not yet like Surah Al-Baqarah when it's confronting in full-fledged confrontation the critiques of Jews and Christians. In Mecca, Jews and Christians are a theoretical possibility or a theoretical reality much more than an actual reality. What's far more present are the kuffar. The Christians and Jews they come into the picture really in full-fledged in Medina. That's one. But then the other is that if you look at the context of Surah, the ayah of number 14, is that it's talking about that constant message that Allah sends to prophet after prophet, and what happens to this message in the context of warning Muslims about what is to the challenges to come. And one of the biggest challenges is infighting. And the type of disagreements and the type of divisions that destroy the best of movements in history. And were it not for a word that has proceeded from thy Lord, ولولا كلمة سبقت من ربك إلى أجل مسمى لقضي بينهم وإن الذين أورثوا الكتاب من بعدهم لفي شك منه مريب. Okay, so, and ولولا كلمة سبقت من ربك literally is translated, had it not been or were it not for a word that had proceeded from thy Lord. But figuratively what it means is that it is, understand that when you see people deviate and still exist, it is because of God's benevolence. In other words, if God would have willed, God would have exterminated all the diversity that you see, all the disagreements, all the sectarianism. It exists because God allows it to exist. But understand that its very existence, the fact that God puts up with you, is because of God's benevolence, not an accident. In other words, something that you should be grateful for. That despite the fact that you've mucked it up so badly, God still puts up with you, is something that you ought to be grateful for. فَلِذَلِكَ This is one of the very few times that the Quran uses the word فَلِذَلِكَ. Therefore, linguistically, it is something that when the Quran says فَلِذَلِكَ, especially in this grammatical construction, then you pay attention. When Allah says therefore, you say, oh, so God is delivering sort of the demand. فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم والله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير. So let's unpack this لذلك and therefore. Therefore, فاستقم كما أمرت. فلذلك فادعوا واستقم كما أمرت. First, وادعوا. وادعوا, call people to this faith. Okay, that's the study Quran says summon, but it's wad'u from the word da'wah, like the word da'wah, to call people to a faith. وَاسْتَقِمْ كَمَا أُمِرْتَ, stand firm by what Allah has decreed to you. Now, of course, this is not just to the Prophet ﷺ, but to the followers of the Prophet. وَلَا تَتَّبِعَ أَهْوَاءَهُم, and don't follow whims. And say, I believe in what Allah has, on the books that Allah has sent. So you are communicating to them that the core of the message is the same. Although the implication here, which Allah says later explicitly, is that you've forgotten the core of the message. You've corrupted the core of the message. And my charge, what I am obligated to you to do vis-a-vis you, is to treat you with justice. وَأُمِرْتُ لِأَعْدِلَ بَيْنَكُمْ. My God and your God is Allah. I have my deeds, you have your deeds. لا حجة بيننا وبينكم, meaning no arguments between us. We should not argue with one another. Because ultimately we will all stand before God, who will judge between us. Now, what is remarkable is that this is revealed in Mecca, before the Hijrah. It is preparing Muslims at the time who are hardly in survival mode, who don't even know if they're going to make it. But Allah knows they're going to make it. And Allah knows that the next challenge are Jews and Christians. And that what they're going to tell Jews and Christians who are going to come into the picture, but the Prophet didn't know it at the time, is that it's one message, people. But I'm not going to argue with you because I know I'm not going to convince you. You have a history of human egoism that corrupted things. And ultimately, your God and my God is one. And ultimately, God is going to judge between us. My obligation is to treat you justly. Now, for people who are persecuted and disempowered, to tell Christians and Jews, my obligation is to treat you justly, it's the most laughable thing in the world. It's like can you imagine like a poor, oppressed, I don't know, Palestinian telling a Palestinian who lives under occupation tells Israelis, I'm going to resolve all the disputes between you Israelis in due time. It sounds insane, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's going to come. And it's a remarkable crafting of the ethics of a stage to come. Knowing what Surah Shura is, do you know, subhanAllah, it's like I gone from a phase of like not wanting to share what I know about Surah Shura. That's the jealous phase. But then the phase where I feel very sad when I think of every Muslim that doesn't know what is in Surah Shura. وَالَّذِينَ يُحَاجُّونَ فِي اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا اسْتُجِيبَ لَهُ حُجَّتُهُمْ ضَاحِضَةٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَعَلَيْهِمْ غَضَبٌ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ شَدِيدٌ. This is now 16. Because the translation again is literal, but what it's saying is the 16 is that as to those there are those who answered Allah's call. There are those who, it's talking about those who believed and following Muhammad ﷺ. But yet, they're surrounded by Meccans who are consistently trying to dissuade those who believed to renege, to leave the faith. And it's saying those who continue to argue, to misguide and mislead those who have answered Allah's call, their fate is not good. Does this have any relevance beyond the Meccan context? Well, yes. That you will see all the time in our, even in every lived society, those, the people who are pious, people who are God-fearing, people who are good Muslims, will often raise the ire of a certain type of people who are threatened by their piety. And they can't help themselves but try to convince them to, they'll either say something like, "Oh, you're too straight, you're too conservative, oh, you're too close-minded, why don't you try this?" But it's talking about these type of people who are always eaten, they're burning up with a certain type of vehemence towards those who answer God's call. And it's saying you're vermin, basically. and Allah is going to give you your due in the hereafter. Because it's not just that it's one thing if you were misguided and kept it to yourself and just limited your damage to yourself. But you go after those who are guided because your ego can't handle it. You are threatened by other people's piety. Okay, and الله الذي أنزل الكتاب الله الذي أنزل الكتاب بالحق والميزان وما يدريك لعل الساعة قريب يستعجل بها الذين لا يؤمنون بها والذين آمنوا مشفقون منها ويعلمون أنها الحق ألا إن الذين يمارون في الساعة لفي ضلال بعيد. Okay, so this is now 17 and 18. First, we'll do a little bit of a strange thing where we'll take 18 before 17. 18 is saying that those who don't believe in the hereafter are often saying, well, why doesn't it come already? It's already been 1,000 years, it's already been 2,000 years, it's already been 3,000 years. As if that passage of time with Allah, الَّذِي لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, is parallel to this is precisely when God warns us about thinking God in human terms. Because if you think of God in human terms, then you think about, well, it's been already 2,000 years since Jesus, it's been 1,400 years since Muhammad, why doesn't the hereafter come already? Well, that's projecting human logic onto God. As we will see, the Quran tells us explicitly, that's nothing in God's time. That's but a minute. It's as if God had created the world but an hour ago. So, those who don't believe are constantly taking the issue, the idea of the hereafter or the final day, not seriously, and sort of mocking it or saying, why doesn't it come? While a true sign of Iman is that you're actually apprehensive about it. A true sign of Iman is that you are worried about that time and about that day and about having to stand judgment. So then let's go back to 17. Okay, I'm going to skip a quote. I'm just skipping a quote, not the discussion, so nobody freak out. Grace and Sharif. Okay. الله الذي أنزل الكتاب بالحق والميزان. Okay. Allah sent the book with truth, al-haq, that's understandable, right? Wal-mizan, and the balance. Balance means justice. Have you ever paused to think about what does it mean to say God sent the book with the balance? If you analyze it, it only has one possible meaning. Or one possible meaning was two parts. Part one is that the book is telling you about the balance, i.e. justice, in the hereafter. But how about the here now? To say God sent the book with the truth, okay, we sort of understand what that means. But to say God sent the book with justice, if you think of it as part two, in the here now, meaning the book with the imperative of justice. So it's like saying, أمركم الله بالعدل والتسوية والعمل بالشرائع قبل أن يفاجئكم يوم القيامة. Allah is telling you, I've sent the book with the imperative of justice and haqq. So follow haqq, the truth, and establish justice before you are surprised with the hereafter. If there was nothing in the Quran but this ayah alone about justice, it would be enough to make Muslims understand how core justice is to the Islamic message. If Allah is saying this book was sent with truth and justice, means what? That if you don't have justice, you don't have the book. So all the Muslims that seem to think it's okay to live in injustice, it's a contradiction in terms. There is no Islam without justice. It is not because you call yourself the Islamic Republic or the Islamic Kingdom or the protector of the holy sites or the, I don't know, Battikh, whatever. That's not what's going to say that you are establishing the book. It is haqq, truth, and justice. And it's Allah saying, establish it before you're confronted with its inevitability in the hereafter. الله لطيف بعباده يرزق من يشاء وهو القوي العزيز ومن كان يريد حرث الآخرة نزد له في حرثه ومن كان يريد حرث الدنيا نؤته منها وما له في الآخرة من نصيب. 19. Allah al-Latif bi'ibadah. The study Quran says God is kind unto God's servants. يرزق من يشاء وهو القوي العزيز. Study Quran said God provides for whomever God's will, and God is strong and mighty. Okay. Al-Latif bi'ibadah. Al-Lutf is kindness, it's benevolence, it's God who takes care of what God's created. And part of that is that God gives everything that you have, everything that we human beings have, whatever ni'mah we enjoy is what God gives us. But then Allah comes and says in verse 20, whoever desires this earth, Allah will give him this earth. And whoever desires the hereafter, Allah will give him the hereafter. But whoever desires this earth exclusively, Allah will give them whatever they want in this earth, but they have no share in the hereafter. Now, Allah latifun bi'ibadah, that phrase, Imam Junayd would say, لطف بأوليائه فعرفوه وَلَوْلَا لُطْفِهِ بِأَعْدَائِهِ مَا جَحَدُوهَا. Meaning, Allah's lutf, Allah's kindness and benevolence towards awliya'ih, those, the allies of Allah, is what allows those allies to come to know Allah. However, it is because of Allah's kindness and benevolence towards Allah's enemies that Allah allows Allah's enemies jahaduh to treat Allah with disdain and hostility. So your hostility, your disbelief in Allah is in itself a product of Allah's benevolence and kindness. So how kind and benevolent is Allah? As again, in trying to understand lutf, the idea of lutf in Islamic theology is so critical that it boggles my mind that so many Muslims are raised without ever being educated in it. Part of Allah's lutf, part of Allah's benevolence is that those who believe in Allah لا يرجو إلا فضله, that they what they covet is more of Allah's benevolence and kindness. But do you know what they fear? They fear God's justice. وَلَا يَخَافُ إِلَّا عَدْلِهِ. It's not that we fear Allah's anger. We fear Allah's justice. Because in our core, we know that if Allah treats us with the strict measurements of justice, we're in trouble. Think about that. You don't need to worry about Allah's anger. It's not personal. Allah is not going to be angry at you. What you need to worry about is that Allah is going to be just with you. Strict measurements of justice. And what you actually want is Allah to overlook and to take it easy and not apply strict justice. Another thing you want to understand Allah's lutf, Allah's benevolence, the nature of Allah's benevolence is إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَرْحَمُ مَنْ لَا يَرْحَمُ نَفْسَهُ. Allah invariably treats with mercy and compassion every person who does not treat themselves with mercy and compassion. Again, reflect upon that. There are invariably, in all of our lives, there are numerous instances where the way we used our bodies, the way we used our wills, the way we used our relationships, could have followed a desire, but it was foolhardy, because if we would have suffered the full consequences of our actions, the results would not have been merciful or compassionate upon ourselves. And yet Allah steps in and has mercy and compassion upon those who did not have mercy and compassion upon themselves. Every person who's fornicated and didn't get an STD, every cell in your body that could have turned cancerous, and Allah knows it, but you don't know it. Numerous situations. This is repeated in a lot of Sufi literature, but if Allah would, at the moment of creation, would have told you, listen, I'm going to create you. It's an exercise to understand Allah's mercy. I'm going to create you and send you in this earth. On this earth, I'm going to create you, and I'm going to give you a choice. You either have, I'll change the years. In the example that they teach us, they tell us 60 years, but I'll make it 80 years. You're going to have 80 years of absolute happiness. Choice number one, 80 years of absolute happiness, followed, however, by 8,000 years of absolute misery. Or, choice number two, 80 years of misery, followed by 8,000 years of absolute happiness. You choose. Allah's mercy is that for those who believe in Allah, Allah doesn't put you in front of that choice. In fact, whatever suffering you go through, Allah says, I'll send you to earth, and whatever suffering you go through, if you believe in me, on top of your reward in the hereafter, if you believe in me, I will reward you for every second of suffering. That's another way to understand Allah's lutf. Because we often say suffering, but that's a creator. And Allah could have created us with a very draconian choice. Pick. 80 years now or 8,000 years later. But Allah didn't put us in front of this draconian choice. And if Allah would have put us in front of this draconian choice, could any of you have said that Allah is unjust? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. On verse 20, about the topic of harth al-dunya, harth al-akhirah, there is a hadith attributed to the Prophet ﷺ that says, بشر هذه الأمة بالثناء والرفعة والنصر والتمكين في الأرض ما لم يطلب الدنيا بعمل الآخرة, which means it's like the Prophet ﷺ says, this ummah, the Muslim ummah, has the promise of rif'ah, of being respected and victorious, وَالتَّمْكِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ, and strength, being strong, as long as they do not start pursuing life on earth as if it is a hereafter. One of these hadiths that has obvious relevance to our modern condition, when the Muslim Ummah lost sight of its priorities. I believe that a covenant between it and God has been broken, and you see the results of that. We live it every day. There is a hadith Qudsi that is often cited in the discussions on verse 20, in which hadith Qudsi means it's a hadith in which Allah speaks, but reported from the Prophet. So the Prophet says, Allah says, but it's not a part of the Quran. It says, Ibn Adam تفرغ لعبادتي أملأ صدرك غنى وأسد فقرك وإن لا تفعل ملأت صدرك شغلا ولم أسد فقرك. Paraphrasing it basically is that Allah is talking to human beings and says, if you dedicate the time to worshiping me, to getting close to me, I fill your heart with wealth, meaning I fill you spiritually, and I take care, I provide you with your material needs. So although you get, there's no promise of wealth, but material wealth, but that material needs are met and your heart feels rich. But if you don't, ملأت صدرك شغلا, your heart will only be filled with restlessness and anxiety. And there's no guarantee that your material needs will be met either. It's among the hadiths that you find particularly in Sufi-esque tafsir, and they often have discussions on it and so on. Okay, let's move on. So, verse 21, I don't have much to say about 21, because it simply underscores the same theme of that partners with God, especially in the affairs of religion, is disastrous, and that theme will come up again and again in the Quran in different contexts. So I'm not going to pause at 21. And with 22, I'm not going to pause with this verse either, except it emphasizes that in the hereafter, the hopelessness and the despair of those that didn't heed the call of their Lord. So let's go to 23. ذلك الذي يبشر الله عباده الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى ومن يقترف حسنة نزد له فيها حسنا إن الله غفور shakur. The study Quran says this is what whereof God gives glad tidings to God's servants, those who believe and do and perform righteous deeds. Say, I ask not of you any reward, save affection among kinsfolk. And whosoever accomplishes a good deed we shall increase him in goodness thereby. Truly God is forgiving and thankful. The two main issues with this verse. First, you note that it's something that we're now very familiar with, that always Iman is coupled with Amal al-Salih, belief and good actions. So belief alone is not enough, but it must be translated into action. Okay, but قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. Interestingly enough, this part of this verse, that I don't ask you for any reward except al-mawadda fil qurba. Al-mawadda fil qurba, literal translation would be kindness. How did it affection among kinsfolk, kindness or good treatment because of our kin's relationship. Interestingly enough, this part, you find a lot written about it, and I'm not quite sure why it engaged Muslim theologians so much. Theoretically, I understand the theoretical issue. The theoretical issue is that the Prophet ﷺ is saying that I ask you for no reward. The only thing I'm asking for is that you be kind to me because we're relatives. In a nutshell, that's what it is. And then they go into these long discussions as to what are the implications of this, whether treating him kindly because they're relatives is consistent or inconsistent with the reward. Some even confuse, although this is a Meccan surah, they start talking about an incident that happened in Medina between the Ansar and the Muhajirin, the native Medinians and the immigrants. What is interesting, though, is I don't think the theological issue of whether this is consistent with the reward or not is not actually that interesting, because it's not a reward. It's like saying, I'm not asking for anything. All I'm asking is that you be decent to me because we're related. But there is an ethical a subtext here, and something that a number of theologians noticed, that the imperative of al-mawadda fi al-qurba, the imperative of kindness and friendliness among family relations, doesn't go away because you have different faith. although the Wahhabis before whatever they are now was MBS, who knows what they are. But the original Wahhabis, let's say, the original Wahhabis, would often say that a difference in faith means that there is no friendliness, no friendship, no kindness, even among relatives. But as a number of theologians pointed out, that the Quran itself, when it underscores this, it's like saying, you persecute me as if there are no family relations between us. The other thing to note is actually something I remember reading in Muhammad Afsad's a translation of the Quran. He translated this in a rather interesting way. He said, Al-mawadda fi qurba means, I forgot the way he phrased it, but basically that accept our bond as human beings. That I ask you for no reward except that you treat me decently as a fellow human being. I'm not sure I agree with that translation just because of the Arabic, although I understand his logic in reading al-mawadda fi qurba, because he in a nutshell, that there is a basic, as the Prophet ﷺ says in a number of hadiths, you are all of one father. And the logic of Muhammad Asad followed is that since we are all as human beings descendants of one father, then we are all kinsmen. We all have a relationship of kinship. And so it would make sense for it to be that you owe me a relationship of decency as a fellow human being. وَمَنْ يَقْتَرِفْ حَسَنَةً نَزِدْ لَهُ فِيهَا حُسْنًا. Now this phrase, the literal translation, again, it sort of loses some nuance in it. And whoever does a good deed, we shall increase him in goodness thereby. This is what the study Quran says. On the one hand, it says that whoever does a good deed, we will increase this good deed. But grammatically, the way it's phrased, when you say نَزِدْ لَهُ فِيهَا حُسْنًا, it's very consistent with the general theme of what if you take one step towards Allah, Allah takes 10 steps towards you. And it's very consistent with the idea that the commission of goodness beautifies you. When you do good, Allah beautifies you. And so in Sufi-esque tafsir, they write quite a bit about this. And there is where you find a lot of this and similar articulations of the Quran, where you find a lot of the writing about the way that doing what is beautiful has transformative effects even upon your physical materiality on this earth. You become more beautified as a human being. In other language, you become a human being of light. That when we pray, when the Prophet ﷺ used to pray to Allah, a long dua that, Allah make light before me, make light ahead of me, make between my hands light, between my eyes light, make in my soul light, in my body light, in my heart light. The very idea of the performance of beauty beautifies a human being, and in other words, illuminates the human being. 24, which will lead up to the conclusion of Surah Shura, towards the end of the surah. But on the one hand, it says something that we're very familiar with. On the one hand, it says that, there are those who say that the Prophet ﷺ is making all of this up, saying that they don't know what they're talking about. That's familiar. There's nothing different about that. But the way it responds to them underscores the hierarchy of the divine in a rather interesting way. So let's see how to translate. And they say, it's as if, do they say that he has fabricated a lie against God? He means the Prophet ﷺ. And then God responds to this by saying, if God would have willed, God would have put a seal upon your heart, for God wipes out falsehood and verifies truth through God's words. فإن يشاء الله يختم على قلبك ويمحو الله الباطل ويحق الحق بكلماته. So this actually, some theologians posit this because it's saying, if it was true that this man was lying, fabricating lies, Allah would have sealed his heart. But what does sealed his heart mean? If you try to analyze it, some said, well, sealed his heart, well, he wouldn't get any more wahy, any more revelation. But the whole point is that they're saying he's lying. So that wouldn't make any sense. But Allah would have sealed his heart, that if it's true that this man was lying about God, Allah would have sealed his heart, meaning the manifestation of the beautiful human being that you see, that human being that you yourself know as a sadiq, the truthful, and an ameen, as the honest, as a person who exudes beauty, is an impossibility with someone who is fabricating lies about God. But then when now the part that becomes, it moves into the ethical discourses of Islam, what follows after that is وَيَمْحُ اللَّهُ الْبَاطِلِ وَيُحِقُّ الْحَقَّ بِكَلِمَاتِهِ. Allah supports truth with his words, with God's words. So, number of theologians, especially in the Sufi tradition, said, well, the main instrumentality, which is consistent again with the the penultimate statement in Surah Shura. The main instrumentality that Allah uses to support truth after Islam are words, which centers back to the sanctity of words. So the first thing that Allah takes when Allah wants to punish a people because of their misdeeds is that Allah takes the value of words away from their hearts. They no longer appreciate words. Meaning no longer means anything to them. Okay. وهو الذي يقبل التوبة عن عباده ويعفو عن السيئات ويعلم ما تفعلون. 25. And it is God who accepts repentance from servants, from God's servants, and pardons evil deeds. And God knows whatever you do. Now, I wouldn't have paused at this verse except for a quote that I want to share with you. And this is from a quote that is often cited in the context of Surah Shura, and it is from Imam Ali radiallahu anhu. And there is a man who enters the mosque, and this man enters the mosque and he keeps saying astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh, doing istighfar. And then he prayed. But something about the way this man was saying astaghfirullah crossed Imam Ali the wrong way. Imam Ali noticed that the way this man is doing istighfar was, the report doesn't tell us exactly what, other than that it wasn't sincere, it wasn't real. So Imam Ali tells him, يا هذا توبتك تحتاج إلى توبة. The way you're saying istighfar requires tawbah, requires repentance. It's like your very istighfar requires repentance. So the man said, why? So Imam Ali says, al-istighfar yaqa ala sittat ma'ani. True repentance has 6 meanings, or 6 parts. على الماضي من الذنوب الندامة، ولتضييع الفرائض الإعادة، ورد المظالم، وإذابة النفس في الطاعة كما ربيتها في المعصية، وإذاقة النفس مرارة الطاعة كما أذقتها حلاوة المعصية، والبكاء بدل ضحك ضحكته. So, what are these 6? It says, if you've missed a farida, then you have to make it up. You like missed prayers or fasting, you have to make it up. And if you've committed an injustice, then you have to address the injustice. You have to make whole again. You have to compensate or address the injustice by fixing it. وإذابة النفس في الطاعة كما ربيتها في المعصية. And you have, in the same way that you've built yourself upon sin, you have to melt that self in regret. وإذاقة النفس مرارة الطاعة كما أذقتها حلاوة المعصية. And it's the same way you've tasted the joy and pleasure of sin, you have to address that with an equal measure of the, I'll use the word, but don't misunderstand it, with the bitterness of repentance. You can't have fun, and then say, oh, astaghfirullah, God will just forgive me. والبكاء بدل كل ضحك ضحكته. And tears instead to replace every laugh you've laughed. Repentance, Imam Ali is teaching us, is serious business. It is not just simply sitting and say astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. It is thinking about your sins, truly regretting your sins, and thinking of what you gained from the sins and erasing any, what in the language of law, unjust enrichment you've gained through your sins. Illicit feelings of joy and pleasure during a sin are just unjust enrichment. They're feelings you are not entitled to. And you must erase them. Again, you find this tradition with long commentary, especially in Sufi-esque tafsir. Okay. And, okay, so 26, I'm not going to say much about it other than it underscores that Allah responds to those who replace sin with good deeds. وَيَزِيدُهُم مِّن فَضْلِهِ, that Allah responds with generosity and kindness. Then we come to 27. وَلَوْ بَسَطَ اللَّهُ الرِّزْقَ لِعِبَادِهِ لَبَغَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَكِنْ يُنَزِّلُ بِقَدَرٍ مَا يَشَاءُ إِنَّهُ بِعِبَادِهِ خَبِيرٌ بَصِيرٌ. So, in 27, Shura underscores something that we encountered already in Surah Al-Zukhruf, which is revealed after Shura, but which we've dealt with before Shura. And the idea that if Allah would have given human beings the riches they covet, injustice would be beyond all imagination on this earth. Whatever injustice you see, with as much that God has given human beings, well, things would have been much, much worse if it hadn't been for the fact that God consistently holds back. But at the same time, if it's a question of how much life on earth is worth, Allah would have no objections with giving human beings all they desire. But Allah doesn't do that because Allah saves human beings from their own follies. 28, I'm not going to say, okay. So, and Allah sends the rain, and Allah spreads Allah's mercy, and every moving thing on either in the heavens, and notice here, خلق السماوات والأرض وما بث فيهما من دابة. The heavens and the earth. The earth, we know, dabba on earth are all the living things on earth. But what are the living things on heaven? Well, partly angels, but don't forget that in the heavens there could be a dawab that we don't know. Someone showed me a recent the U.S. declassified its report on UFOs. يخلق ما لا تعلمون. There is no reason to believe that we are it. Allah creates what you don't know. This is 29. وما بث فيهما من دابة. Uh, 29 is, I'm just curious how they translated dabba in 29, which literally means whatever walks. The heavens and all moving creatures that are in the heavens or earth. Yeah, moving creatures. Okay. وما أصابكم من مصيبة فبما كسبت أيديكم ويعفو عن كثير وما أنتم بمعجزين في الأرض وما لكم من دون الله من ولي ولا نصير. And whatever misfortune or whatever suffering befalls you, it's because of what you have earned with your own hands. And if you only knew Allah saved you from, وَيَعْفُ عَنْ كَثِيرٍ means that Allah saves you from so many of your own follies. Allah is consistently and constantly intervening to actually mitigate what you earn with your own hands. This is true, more true in our age than even when it was revealed. وَمَا أَنْتُمْ بِمُعْجِزِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. This is 31. The study Quran says, you thwart not on earth and you have no protector or helper apart from God. وَمَا أَنْتُمْ بِمُعْجِزِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ meaning it's not you thwart not, but it means, and regardless of how powerful you become, بِمُعْجِزِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ, you will never become you will never become all dominant. You will never become sovereign on earth. It's like you could become very advanced and it could go to your head, but you don't realize how frail and vulnerable you are. And in fact, without God, you have no ally. Okay. ومن آياته الجواري في البحر كالأعلام إن يشأ يسكن الريح فيظللن رواكد على ظهره إن في ذلك لآيات لكل صبار شكور أو يوبقهن بما كسبوا ويعفو عن كثير ويعلم الذين يجادلون في آياتنا ما لهم من محيص فما أوتيتم من شيء فمتاع الحياة الدنيا وما عند الله خير وأبقى للذين آمنوا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. So this is now, notice 32 and 33. It talks about, literally, that those that sail on the seas, and that ships that sail on the seas, it is because of Allah's mercy. And if Allah would have willed, either they would have remained static or they would drown. And so when things go your way, keep in mind that it is because of Allah that they go your way, which is of course something that all too often human beings forget. However, in Sufi-esque tafsir, they notice that these ayat mirror something that we find in Surah Al-A'raf. We haven't done Surah Al-A'raf yet, but that Surah Al-A'raf talks about three categories of people: those who find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and move forward, and those who don't find Allah and sink, and those who remain stuck in between. And I just want to flag this. Just remember it, inshallah, when we get to Surah Al-A'raf, because those ships that sail on the sea are like those who in fact find Allah and move forward. And ships that drown in the sea are like those who fail to find Allah and drown. And then there's the category of people who are neither in hell nor heaven. Are there people who are going to be stuck in between? They are neither going to hell nor heaven? Yes. And wait till we get Surah Al-A'raf. But this is the same category of people who are like ships in the sea without wind or without a storm. They don't drown and they don't sail. They're simply stuck. Now, what becomes of them? What's their fate? How long are they stuck neither in hell nor heaven? Let's wait till we get to A'raf, inshallah, when Allah wills. 36, I skipped, I know, but فما أوتيتم من شيء فمتاع الحياة الدنيا وما عند الله خير وأبقى للذين آمنوا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. So, and again, Allah reminds you, whatever you enjoy on this earth, this is just the pleasure of life on this earth. If you only knew what is with Allah in the next life, is far more meaningful and far more permanent. Then after 36, Surah Shura gears up to what I call the penultimate statement, والذين يجتنبون كبائر الإثم والفواحش وإذا ما غضبوا هم يغفرون. Okay, so they avoid the major sins. كبائر الإثم are major sins. فواحش, what are فواحش? Fawahish are major immoralities. Some, especially the juristic-oriented tafsir, said al-fawahish is whatever sin that is committed publicly. But I'm not convinced of that. Fawahish are major immoralities. Like in some situations, raising your yelling at your mother, for instance, could be a fahisha. It might be that yelling at your mother is not a kabira in some circumstances, but in other situations, so for instance, if you yell at your mother in a situation where she becomes utterly humiliated in front of everyone, you completely destroy her sense of dignity, then it's a fahisha. If you yell at your wife, maybe yelling at your wife is not a kabira, it's not a major sin, but in some situation, yelling at your wife is a fahisha. Why? If you come, let's say your wife is being honored in some event or getting her degree, getting her doctorate, and you stand there and you start yelling at her and humiliating her in front of everyone. That's a fahisha. Don't think like your lawyers. It's not just technical infractions, but there's also immoral infractions. وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوا هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. And if they are angry, they are capable of forgiving. Now, again, Surah Shura is revealed in the late Meccan period to a persecuted people, and like Surah Fussilat, it comes and says to them, remember in Surah Fussilat, revealed right before Shura, they were told, treat those who treat you unkindly with kindness, and they will become as if your best friend. Then in Surah Shura, it comes back to the same theme, and it says, and if they get angry, they're capable of forgiving to a people who are persecuted, and a people who are going to confront a huge challenge of confronting the hostility and antagonism of Mecca in open warfare. وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ. And those who answer God's call, وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةِ. And they pray, or that وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةِ, and they consistently pray. وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. And that's where Shura comes in. وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. And from what we've given them, they spend. Okay, I'm going to come back to the Shura, but I want to go through to 40 first. وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَهُمُ الْبَغْيُ هُمْ يَنْتَصِرُونَ. This is now 39. وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلُهَا فَمَنْ عَفَا وَأَصْلَحَ فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ وَلِمَنْ انْتَصَرَ بَعْدَ ظُلْمِهِ فَأُولَئِكَ مَا عَلَيْهِمْ مِنْ سَبِيلٍ. This is 41. إِنَّمَا السَّبِيلُ عَلَى الَّذِينَ يَظْلِمُونَ النَّاسَ وَيَبْغُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ أُولَئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. Okay, let's do 43 too. وَلِمَنْ صَبَرَ وَغَفَرَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ لَمِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. Okay, so now we get to that penultimate section of Surah Shura. So, first, avoiding major sins, avoiding immorality. You're able to control your anger with forgiveness. Why? So much sin is committed because of anger. So many people commit sin not because they're bad people, but because they have a sense of grievance. They feel aggrieved they feel they've been wronged. And because they feel they've been wronged, they feel they have a right. That is at the heart of so much sin. In fact, now talking about the unseen world, alam al-ghayb, anger in 90% of the time where demons enter our physical world, they enter through the door of anger. This is my own experience. I'm not getting this from a book, this is what I've observed. When demons enter our world, 90% of the time, it's because of anger. 10% is all the other stuff. And prayer. But then right after prayer, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. Before وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. And before they spend. Now remember, what did we say about the word shura? What did we say? Shawara and nahl, meaning the bees, or shawara al-asal. The bees produced honey. Shura is a way to refer to a dynamic that produces goodness. وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. And the way they manage their affairs is through shura. We know that bees produce honey from, we've already did Surah An-Nahl, right? The way bees do honey is through a meticulous system of mutual cooperation. Bees don't have volition and free will. Their shura is all instinct. It is as if وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ is as if Allah is saying, produce your honey. But the challenge is that we have free will. So how are you going to get human beings to produce honey when they have free will? It's the other meaning of the word shura, tamkeen. Tamkeen means that a human being must feel that they have worth, that they have an impact, that they're effective. If you take a human being and you translate to them, you don't matter, they're not going to produce honey. They're going to become poison. They're going to derail the process. Yes, I want you to control your anger, but here is the secret of how you help the process of controlling anger at a social level. It is through the mechanism of shura. Without shura, remember what Surah Shura kept warning us about. How people divide and break, how people get one message and then they fall into divisions and sects. Why do they do that? Because of their egos. But why? Because of the rancor and anger and spite. So yes, you must learn to control the anger, but at a social level, what will help you in doing that is that you have to learn to conduct your affairs through shura. Now, forget the jurisprudential debate about whether shura is mulzama or ghayru mulzama. That's not the issue. The challenge is how to conduct the affairs of your marriage, the affairs of your family, the affairs of your community, the affairs of your neighborhood, the affairs of your nation, the affairs at every level through Shura. What is the procedural process? You figure it out. You want to call it democracy, you want to call it bibliocracy, you want to call it phantocracy, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. But it is the moral substance that matters. Because then, if you have that system of Shura, where the rich and the poor both have an input in the ultimate decision making, then you will have وَمِمَّا رَزَقَهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Then you will have spending, equitable spending. It is like a symphonic performance. Now look at, now I just collected some of the tradition, what they say about Shura. قال الحسن رضي الله عنه ما تشاور قوم إلا هدوا لأرشد أمرهم. Hassan says رضي الله عنه that human beings, whenever people conduct their affairs, their shura, they will always get the most wise result. In another report, Al-Hasan radiallahu anh says even more than that. ما شاور قوم قط إلا هداهم الله. If a people conduct their affairs through shura, Allah will guide them towards what is right. قيل لأن المشاورة اجتماع العقول والأذهان. Why? Because in shura is where the intellects with all of the diversity that Allah created come together in a participatory model where you actually benefit from the diversity and the difference rather than ignore it. Some, in explaining Shura, said لا ينفردون بالرأي ولا يستأثر بعضهم على بعض. No one simply does whatever their opinion is. No, in other words, affairs of that society is not hinged on the opinions of just one person or one class or one strata or one race or one ethnicity or one gender. ولا يستأثر بعضهم على بعض, and none of them is able to take advantage of the other. So when you find modern Muslims come and say whether Shura is democracy or not democracy, that is not the issue. The issue is if you can create a system that is more Shura-esque than democracy, go for it. But to say that despotism can be consistent with Islam, it's like literally blaspheming against the Quran. No way, shape, or form tyranny and despotism can be consistent with Islam. Period. And this is why when we refer to in Sunni Islam, we refer to the period of the four rightly guided caliphs, we say كانت خلافتهم شورى, that this was the Shura period of Khilafah. And for a long time, Muslims had the sense to understand that once Shura was lost, it no longer was Khilafah, it was Mulk. When you find modern Muslims get confused about things that we've gone through centuries of turmoil to learn, that Shura equals just Khilafah, absence of Shura equals Mulk, tyranny. And then you find modern Muslims who say, no, it's okay to live under a tyrant. I don't know what to say. Haven't they read Surah Shura? Haven't they studied Surah Shura? Haven't they memorized Surah Shura? Then, وَإِذَا أَصَابَهُمُ الْبَغْيُ هُمْ يَنْتَصِرُونَ. This verse is another verse. If the Quran said nothing else about justice other than that, it would have been enough. Why? Because, let's see how the Study Quran translates it. 39, and if tyranny befalls them, they defend themselves. Again. وَإِذَا أَصَابَهُمُ الْبَغْيُ. If injustice befalls them, okay, if injustice befalls them, هُمْ يَنْتَصِرُونَ. They have the means to address the injustice. In other words, they have the mechanism to achieve justice. In other words, if you build a society where you can suffer injustice and there is no means of redress, you violated the Quranic command. But the grammatical construction of Surah Shura clearly indicates that Shura itself is necessary for addressing injustice. And spending equitably is necessary for addressing injustice. So, when you find modern Muslims and you find the institutions of law weak and undeveloped, it's blasphemous. For centuries, Muslims were far ahead of the world in justice because they understood if you could have the Khilafah be a mess, but not the judiciary. Because if the judiciary is a mess, if law is a mess, then there's no hope. Then Allah completely abandons you. Even that now is lost. But what is more important is that Muslims even just understand the moral principle, because nothing is really completely lost unless you don't actually understand the moral principle anymore. You could lose the institutions, but as long as you don't lose the ideas, you still have hope. But when you lose the ideas, there is no hope. وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَهُمُ الْبَغْيُ هُمْ يَنْتَصِرُونَ. They have a way of addressing baghi. وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلُهَا. Okay, so now, if there is an offense, justice means that it should be addressed in equal and proportional measure. مثلها, like it, in proportion. Now, on the issue so Al-Razi says, هذه الآية أصل كبير في علم الفقه، فإن مقتضاها أن تقابل كل جناية بمثلها، وذلك لأن الإهدار يوجب فتح باب الشر والعدوان، لأن في طبع كل أحد الظلم والبغي والعدوان، فإن لم يزجروا عنه أقدم عليه ولم يتركوا، وأما الزيادة على قدر الذنب فهو ظلم والشرع منزه عنه. So what Al-Razi is saying is that this is a great principle in jurisprudence. Because when you organize society, every offense has to be addressed in proportion to the offense. If there is no ability to address offenses in the first place, justice would be lost, and aggression and injustice would spread. But similarly, if you punish offenses in excess to the offense, that is injustice, and that is not accepted in Sharia. That principle of proportionality in justice, we struggle with that. That's why, although in the American Constitution it says it forbids cruel and unusual punishments, but in reality the Supreme Court has made a complete mockery of that principle. Complete mockery. All types of punishments are way excessive. And, some trials for the same exact offenses, some people are sentenced to 20 years, some people plea bargain 5 years, some people get life without parole. To actually be committed to the principle of proportionality is a great challenge, but it is a great principle of justice itself. Okay. فمن عفا وأصلح فأجره على الله إنه لا يحب الظالمين. So now, as a principle, who is ever able to forgive, وأصلح, not just forgive, وأصلح, meaning forgiveness will lead to no further or greater corruption. So it's not a matter of, just forgive. No, if forgiveness means the spread of injustice, that's not aslah. Look how precise Allah's language is. For Allah, لا يحب الظالمين, Allah doesn't love the unjust. وَلِمَنْ انتصر بعد ظلمه فَأُولَئِكَ مَا عَلَيْهُم مِّن سَبِيلٍ. Allah, the person who is addressing an injustice, and whoever is defending himself, as the Study Quran has been said, after having been wronged, that's not a blameworthy person. Where moral blame comes is with dhulm. إنما السبيل على الذين يظلمون الناس ويبغون في الأرض بغير الحق أولئك لهم عذاب أليم. Injustice, either because you are the initial aggressor or because you responded disproportionately to aggression. وَلِمَنْ صَبَرَ وَغَفَرَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ لَمِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. Those who are capable within the boundaries of Islah, within the boundaries of preserving goodness, but those who are able to persevere, to forgive and be patient, their reward is with Allah. So, as we saw in Surah Fussilat, but here it's spelled out in far greater detail. Justice is an imperative. The mechanism to establish justice is imperative. Proportionality in justice is imperative. Non-aggression is imperative. Self-defense is a right. And it remains a higher moral objective to forgive, as long as it doesn't result in an injustice. For verse 43, there is a story from Imam Hassan radiallahu anhu. that is often quoted, that Imam al-Hasan was sitting when in his majlis he had company, and a man got mad at another man, and the man who got mad started cussing out the man he got mad at. فكان المسبوب يقزم ويعرق فيمسح العرق. And so the man who was being cussed out kept sweating, and it was obvious that he was burning, but he was controlling himself, and he kept wiping out his sweat. And then finally he got up and he recited this verse: ولمن صبر وغفر إن ذلك من عزم الأمور. فقال الحسن: عقلها الله وفهمها إذ ضيعها الجاهلون. So Al-Hasan commented when the man did that about the man's wisdom. And he said, while so many ignorant people did not understand how to implement this verse, this fellow did. The fact that he controlled himself and kept wiping out his tears, and then finally just got up and recited the verse and left. But yeah, the discussion, so say وقالوا العفو مندوب إليه ثم الأمر قد ينعكس في بعض الأحوال فيرجع ترك العفو مندوبا إليه وذلك إذا احتيج إلى كف زيادة البغي وقطع مادة الأذى. وعن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ما يدل عليه، وهو أن زينب أسمعت عائشة بحضرته ما كان ينهاها فلا تنتهي فقال لعائشة دونك فانتصري. So he's saying that that forgiveness is recommended, but sometimes non-forgiveness is recommended, and that is when non-forgiveness is necessary to prevent aggression. And then he says, so for instance, Zainab, one of the Prophet's wives, والسلام, was speaking not very nicely to Aisha in his presence. And Aisha wasn't responding. And then so finally the Prophet ﷺ kept telling Zainab to stop saying whatever she was saying. And she wouldn't listen. So finally he said to Aisha, okay, fine, then answer her back. In other words, tell her off. Defend yourself. Then from 42 to 47, as is with so many surah, as it approaches the end, it takes you again to remind you of the hereafter. And that ultimately, in the hereafter, those who've heeded what Allah has said will be in good shape. But that those who do not, as the image portrayed here, that they will stand يغرضون عليها خاشعين من الذل ينظرون من طرف خفي, that their heads lowered, ينظرون من طرف خفي, just gazing like sneaking a peek, like they're too scared and too degraded to be able to lift their heads and take a full look at the misery that surrounds them. So they're sneaking a peek. They're sort of, looking like this. A very powerful image to, if you ponder it, you do everything to try to avoid it. Okay. واستجيبوا لربكم من قبل أن يأتي يوم لا مرد له من الله ما لكم من ملجأ يومئذ وما لكم من نكير. This is 47. Respond to the call of your Lord before a day that you're not going to be able to avoid comes. You will have no refuge that day, and you will have, nor shall you have any denial. This is 47. Then فإن أعرضوا فما أرسلناك عليهم حفيظا إن عليك إلا البلاغ وإن إذا أذقنا الإنسان منا رحمة فرح بها وإن تصبهم سيئة بما قدمت أيديهم فإن الإنسان كفور لله ملك السماوات والأرض يخلق ما يشاء يهب لمن يشاء إناثا ويهب لمن يشاء ذكور. So 48 spells out what is a running theme throughout Surah Shura. With all that said, when they turn away from you, remember, we did not send you as a guardian or a controller over them. Your obligation is simply to convey the message. And Allah knows the nature of human beings. And Allah knows that when human beings are doing well, enjoying Allah's gifts, they become arrogant and haughty. The implication is they start becoming defiant, and not want to hear a message, a moral message. And yet, when ill will befalls them with the evil that they've committed, فإن الإنسان كفور, they despair and blame everything else and everyone else but themselves. If only human beings would understand that everything on this earth belongs to Allah. Allah is the one that decides who has boys, who has girls. And notice here, يَهِبُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ إِنَاثًا وَيَهِبُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ ذُكُورًا. Inathan was mentioned before dhukur. Girls were mentioned before boys. The reason for that is because Arabs at the time considered girls ill omen. So it's emphasizing that girls is God's will, and that's why it's mentioned before boys. أو يزوجهم ذكرانا وإناثا ويجعل من يشاء عقيما إنه عليم قدير. 50. You study Quranic couples, males and females, and this is the verse. Those who believe that who you marry is predestined rely on this verse. I don't believe that who you marry is predestined, but those who do, that's the verse they rely on. That Allah decides who marries. Because it says أو يزوجهم ذكرانا وإناثا. the couples people. وَيَجْعَلُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ عَقِيمًا, and Allah is the one that decides who's sterile. وَمَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ أَنْ يُكَلِّمَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا وَحْيًا أَوْ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ أَوْ يُرْسِلْ رَسُولًا فَيُوحِي بِإِذْنِهِ مَا يَشَاءُ إِنَّهُ عَلِيٌّ حَكِيمٌ. وكذلك أوحينا إليك روحا من أمرنا ما كنت تدري ما الكتاب ولا الإيمان ولكن جعلناه نورا نهدي به من نشاء من عبادنا وإنك لتهدي إلى صراط مستقيم. Now, here in 51, Allah says, Allah doesn't speak to any human being except through either a hijab, a veil, or a medium. Why does it say that at the end of Surah Shura? Remember, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Nothing is like your Lord. It is as if Surah Shura comes to the very end and says, in order for this entire project to work, the way within the morality that I've said to you, I remind you again, the temptation will be to imagine that because of revelation that you can usurp the mantle of God, God's self, the mantle of divinity. But the barriers between the divine, although God is closer to you than your jugular vein, and although God is with you wherever you go, but when it comes to the place of divinity and the will of divinity, the barriers between a human being and the divine are summed up in لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. And then, talking to the Prophet ﷺ, it says that it's like saying, pay attention that what we are giving this man, what we are giving this Prophet, although some of you have said that he's making it up, and I've told you that if he was making it up, he wouldn't have the beauty that he has. And not only that, but the way Allah supports the truth is through words, not through the miracles that you're looking for. This man didn't know any of what you hear from him. He's lived amongst you till mid-age, till 40-something, or at least 40. And you've heard none of this from him. That nur, that light that you are hearing from him now is Sirat al-Mustaqim. Everything that we told you about justice, about everything from justice to prayer to Shura to infaq is Sirat al-Mustaqim. It's not some marginality in the faith. It is a Sirat al-Mustaqim. But the proof that he is Allah's Prophet is precisely that. Because you wouldn't know any of it, and you wouldn't hear any of it. It is the sirat of Allah, the Lord of the heavens and the earth. And always remember that at the end, everything inevitably returns to Allah. It's like saying, never forget that whatever you do, whatever way you handle these messages, the constant reminder that it all ends up with your Lord. إليه المصير. So Surah Shura is led up to by Surah Fussilat, which tells us in Surah Fussilat the importance of roles, every part performing its role. You cannot succeed if all of you want to be leaders. You cannot succeed if all of you want to be followers. You cannot succeed if you are doing jobs that you are not competent doing. As we said with Surah Fussilat, it is precisely the specification of the importance of roles and the underscoring of the basic ethics that guide the performance of roles. But the message itself is incomplete without Surah Shura. Because Surah Shura, if I would paraphrase it, it's like saying, go back and reread and rethink Surah Shura, and you'll find that the core of Surah Shura is the mechanics and dynamics of justice. Justice in its larger sense, which includes a society that is able to produce goodness, a society in which the dignity of a human being is upheld and the value of it as a human being is upheld. And all of this I emphasize to a people who were persecuted. But because the Prophet ﷺ was there with them, when we study the traditions around Surah Shura, we find that the Prophet ﷺ remarkably was able to get them, to get their mind off their persecution, to focusing on the importance of internalizing the moral lessons of Surah Shura. And Surah Shura then, not for just the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but the whole cause of Shura, which was the rallying cry of so many rebellions in Islamic history, including the rebellion of Hussein, by the way, himself. The main accusation against the Umayyads is that Daya Shura, that they've destroyed the Shura. It wasn't just take our opinions and then ignore them if you wish. What they meant by Shura is the entire concept of a moral order and a just order. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.